heroes were. Who inspired you to really pick up that axe?
Well,
and
I
bless it?
started at the beginning. It was kind of a wide variety of things. I mean, I loved Zeppelin, I loved Eric Clapton, Hendrix. I guess the usual suspects, that you would say. I was really into 45s when I was young. I was really into like great hit songs. Songs that
The hook, yeah.
the hook. That's always something that kind of inspired me.
Yeah.
At the same time, I liked. My dad had really an eclectic taste. He liked everything. He's a Haitian guy, but at the same time, pretty conservative. But every Sunday he'd be blasting the stereo he had, and one time he played Zeppelin, strangely enough, Joan Baez, the Beatles, Isaac Stern, ABBA, very wide. And the funny thing, I look back now, all those years ago, I realized that everything that he told me, you have to come down here and listen to, because this is it. Turned out to all be legendary stuff today. So you realize he actually had a great taste in music. But that's kind of, I listened to a lot of different things, and it all just went into my mental Rolodex.
I mean, you really learn there's only two kinds of music. Music that, hits you, music that you love, and music you don't feel. I mean, that's really it.
That's it.
All these categories and radio formats, and I mean, it's trying to segregate all the music, And again, growing up, African American, what kind of challenges did you have trying to play rock and roll?
Interesting. It's funny what you just said, because I've always felt that way. And nobody's really put it that way to me before. But I agree 100%. Because to me, music is good music or music that I don't feel. As far as if a song has a good melody, it doesn't matter if it's a foreigner song, it doesn't matter if it's, Lemmy singing Ace of Base, it doesn't matter if it's Backstreet Boys singing I Want You, it doesn't matter. If it's something that I feel and I just dig the song, I just dig it. Now, as far as my challenges, I grew up on Long Island in New York, and I was actually probably one of the only black kids, not one of the only, my sister and I were probably, and my brother were like the only ones for miles. So my parents took me away. We lived in Queens at first, and it was trouble. And since we came from Haiti, there was like something that my dad just didn't feel he wanted us growing up in that environment. He said, "This is not right, so I'm going to move them way out to Long Island." We were like, "Oh, great." But somehow it exposed me to different music, because all my friends were white, and they were listening to Zeppelin. It was kind of country. It's just a whole different kind of thing. So I think that played a big part in why I liked rock and roll so much in the beginning. So I still got Motown and other stuff just because it was there.
Right.
But the influence from my peers, what was going around, was Steely Dan in Chevy with an 8-track, you know what I mean, and just listening to things like that. And I think that kind of molded, what I've done. And there was a challenge. I mean, when I first joined the Plasmatics, God, there was nobody listening to, no black people were listening to rock and roll. I mean, they were like, I think it almost like opened the door where people felt like, well, he's in the band, so I guess it's okay to, to go listen to rock and roll,
Sure.
Well,
tell us about how you met, Wendy Williams and Richie, and, joined the legendary Plasmatics.
I was, I started really young. I started playing at 14, or 13 in junior high school rock band. And I was actually on the road with Gary U.S. Bonds at 14 and 15. So I was doing stuff with him. I was his musical director, and I was doing stuff with Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley. Then after that, it kind of accelerated my career a bit, because I had my own band, and he would take us out on the road. You'd do a set of his stuff and a set of your stuff. So for a couple of years after that, I actually ended up moving out of the house, pretty early on, and there was an audition for the Plasmatics. I actually opened for them with a group called NYN, a punk group out of New York that I had just joined briefly. We opened for the Plasmatics. They were just starting. And then a few weeks later in the Village Voice, I saw an ad. I said, you know what, I'm going to try to audition for this. Probably never get it. And I auditioned with a bunch of bass players, and one day the manager just called me and he said, listen, you're the guy. I was, I guess, the perfect other misfit, if you know what I mean.
I mean, did you have the blonde mohawk already?
Not yet, but then again, nobody really did. Richie was the only one with the mohawk, and that's kind of where the whole black guy with the blonde mohawk thing came about. It was a perfect vehicle to be rebellious and to be able to be who you wanted to be, you know, and not
Sure.
feel any limitations. So I think it was a great thing at the time.
Yeah.
To join a band like that.
Well, take us behind the scenes because we know, you know, the legendary music. We know Wendy just pushed the envelope like no one else. You know, what was it like to join that band and just feel that energy, or, you know, be on that cutting edge that they were?
It felt great, you know. It was, to be honest with you, it was very difficult at the beginning because when I joined the band, it was at the very beginning. So there was no money, you know. We were just, it was a real punk, Lower East Side, rehearse in the loft every single day. Everything we did ourselves. You know, we flew up a car, we'd go out and go find the car, buy the cheap car, go buy the gaffer tape, go buy everything was handled by us. It was like a full-time job from morning till night between the rehearsal and stuff. But it just was a great thing. We got in front of those fans and started playing. It's just like if the adrenaline rush from the show, was intriguing to me. And of course, it built from there until the band built a name, and the band got big fairly quickly.
Sure.
You know, it was just I really enjoyed it. And of course, I met so many great people, you know, doing that, so many rockers, because we play LA, and every band that now has become a huge band, from Guns N' Roses to Motley Crue to everything, they'd all be at the shows.
K-Rock was behind you guys. I remember
right.
sold out show, Perkins Palace,
That's
and
right.
all this stuff. Now, tell us what was Wendy like behind the scenes? You know, what was the method to the madness that made her who she was?
She was really dedicated. She was really a true rock and roller. The funny thing is, I think a lot of people look at her and say, well, she was probably doing drugs. She was just, her drug was rock and roll. It was that band and doing this thing. She was running 5 miles every day, which sounds a little straight for what you'd expect. She was doing all kinds of things, but everything was for her to be able to be that person that she was on stage. And when she got on that stage,
She was like an athlete in training.
she just didn't stop. But it's an athlete as far as being in shape, but at the same time, just everything that she did with full intensity. And it was just such a big part of her. And, you know, off stage, she was a nice woman, but she was intense. You know, she was like, hey, John, you know, she's an intense woman. It's like, she was, you know, you've probably seen interviews with her. That's who she was, and you know, God bless, we lost her. And I think, you know, I don't know exactly why, but I think probably because she didn't have the ability to be able to be that person and to have that vehicle to let out that intensity that she had. You know, when you don't have that vehicle to do it, all of a sudden it just stays inside you. You're like, what are we going to do now?
Explode.
You know what I mean?
Now, tell us about joining Little Steven and Disciples of Soul. Legendary from the E Street Band. I mean, tell us about that.
After my run with the Plasmatics, which was great, it got to the point where I felt that the band was going in a direction that wasn't really right for me. And my ultimate goal was to be a solo artist. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to, be my own boss, basically. And basically, at that point, right when I was about to leave right when I left the Plasmatics, the first offer I got was from Prince. I said, Prince? That's strange. And his management told me he's been at every Plasmatics show and he's a big fan. And he'd like to do a solo record with you, but at the same time would like you to play on his next record. But I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to, I was talking to Billy Idol, and a lot of people wanted me to go play bass with their thing, but I was like, I want to be a solo artist. And then, strangely enough, I ran into Stephen Van Zandt. The manager that I had, who managed Gary U.S. Bonds, was handling Gary U.S. Bonds with Bruce Springsteen and Little Steven's comeback record.
Yeah.
This little girl.
Sure.
You remember?
Yeah.
So the manager, I went back to him after the Plasmatics and started talking to him. He said, I have an idea. Why don't you get together with Little Steven, and have them rehearse Gary in your loft. I had a rehearsal loft in New York. And I just have a feeling something might come out of this. I was like, okay. So I met Steve and played him some of my demos. And he basically told me, listen, I know you want to do your own thing. Nobody's going to sign you unless you're blowing up cars. I had been turned down by every label in the world already. And he said, but if you come work with me for a little while, it'll give you a different credibility. Credibility from being, it's like Plasmatics and Springsteen is as far, opposites as you could possibly imagine.
Some bridge.
And somehow, I like this story. and it was different than just going to play with somebody. So I did that. And, you know,
I mean, he was singing Sun City.
That's
he had
right.
all that. I got to tell you, I was in the front row. The US Festival. You guys, 7 a.m. I mean, the sun had just come up. We got U2, we got Bowie, we got everybody to come. You guys ushered in the legendary US Festival right out here.
That's right, I remember.
250,000 people right out here in San Bernardino.
I remember. That's amazing.
What are your memories of that night, that day?
Funny, somebody just actually sent me pictures about that and gave me a T-shirt from that show. I couldn't believe it.
You had to stay up all night. There's no way you woke up.
It was a fantastic thing. I remember the show. It was the beginning of it all. I mean, legendary show, like you said. It was such great performances. I remember Bono climbing up on the thing. It was just like, it was amazing. But those are the kind of experiences I had, you know, when I was doing that with Stephen. We got to tour with The Who, you know, we did all of Europe. We did a lot of great things. So that was a big stairway for me to move on to other things, you know. But it was great working with, you know, Stephen and doing all of that stuff. He mentored me a lot and helped me with a lot of things. Yeah,
I'm sure there were some great learning experiences there.
Absolutely.
And tell us about Crown of Thorns.
So then Crown of Thorns came about, you know, before Crown of Thorns I went through some other things. I did, you know, a pretty successful solo record and, you know, some other bands. And then Jimmy Iovine got in touch with me. At one point he said, hey, you want to make a solo record? And I've got this label Interscope now. And for some reason I wasn't really ready to make a solo record. I'd done that before. I wanted to work with people. You know, sometimes you get tired just doing everything by yourself and, you know, you're just like, you know, I want some collaboration. And Mickey Free and I at the time had been talking. And Tony Thompson as well. We'd always been running into each other, similar to something that's going on right here at this event now. And, you know, and we said, we should do something someday. So I called everybody and said, why don't we, you know, maybe think of putting something together with this. We were involved with the KISS guys. So basically we kind of formed kind of an alliance and we put together Crown of Thorns. That was the beginning of it. The bad news is the record did not come out on Interscope. There were complications, too many people, too many chefs, too many producers. So it didn't come out here in the US, but it came out all in the rest of the world, all in Japan, etc. Mickey and I actually ended up parting ways at one point, and but I continued with the band, and I made another 8 albums, and we toured Europe and did a bunch of things, you know, throughout the years. And then, but Mickey and I then came back together and started talking about other things. So let's see where it goes. But Crown of Thorns has been 8 albums. Now, but the last album was 2008 or 2009 release, so contemplating doing something else pretty soon. But I'm involved in a lot of different things, so I'm juggling and trying to figure out, you know.
Well, I had the pleasure to know and work with the legendary Tony Thompson.
Oh, I love it.
I mean, playing with Led Zeppelin at Live Aid, I mean, almost being a part of Led Zeppelin, the Chic legacy. I mean, what was it like? Power Station. What was it like to work with Tony?
I love Tony. I've always loved Tony. I've known Tony for years because I'm pretty close. I was close with all the guys in the Chic. Nile Rodgers and I have been friends for years, you know, going way back to the 80s. You know, Bernard Edwards and I were friends and lived in the same building for years. So I've known them for a long time. And we always talked about playing, and I always really admired him. I always thought he was a great musician. So when we finally got the opportunity to get together and do this, I thought it was just fantastic. So I miss him. He was like a brother, besides a fellow musician. And you know, it was a real close relationship. You know, we were always together. You know what I mean? But we miss him. He was just a fantastic drummer, one of a kind.
Sure. And all that you've been through, all that you've seen, what advice would you give to that young creative person, whether they're a writer, a band, a musician? What do they need to do to focus, to really find their own lane and have any kind of shot at longevity?
You know, I think it's the best advice I can really give is follow your heart. I think nobody has figured out a formula. You know what I mean? We all try it. Every label tries it. Every musician tries it.
Yeah. Shortcut.
Everybody's looking for that map, you know, that map to get you to the buried treasure. And somehow, I don't think anybody can figure it out. And you know, I talk to people about this all the time, and you see artists that, I like jazz, and jazz is never going to sell. And then, you know, a jazz artist comes has the biggest record, and Nora Jones. Then all of a sudden, Adele comes out, and everybody's put her on a sub-label over there, and she comes out, and she's huge. I think that you should just master your craft, get as good at what it is that you want to do as you possibly can get, and then just go for it. Just, get yourself out there, promote yourself, get the people, and just follow what you want to do, and the rest will kind of come. Because I think, for me, that's what happened. Every odd was against me. I wanted to do music. I was a little black guy, playing rock and roll, living on Long Island. There wasn't a chance in hell that you actually would end up doing that. But I didn't engineer it. It just happened. And I think now when I look at everything in retrospect, that's probably the best advice that I can give to people.